Misophonia Podcast. This is Season 6, Episode 28. My name is Adil Ahmad, and I have misophonia. This week I'm talking to Nola, a nurse in northern Alberta, Canada. Nola has had misophonia for over 50 years, but only learned it had a name a few months ago. She's been on leave from her job due to a major depressive episode, which she attributes in no small part to years of misophonia wreaking havoc on her nervous system. We talk about dysregulation, co-regulation and attachment theory, epigenetics, EMDR, the psychologist Gabor Maté, and even a shout out to past guest and misophonia legend, Dr. Jennifer Brout. Finally, she reads from her poem about misophonia called The Misophonia Fault Line. Let me know what you think. As always, you can reach me by email at hellomisophoniapodcast.com or find me on Instagram or Facebook at Misophonia Podcast. And by the way, please head over and leave a quick review or rating wherever you listen to this show. It helps us in the algorithms, which helps us reach more listeners. Thanks for the incredible ongoing support of our Patreon supporters. If you feel like contributing, you can read all about the various levels at patreon.com/Misophonia Podcast. And that helps us get transcripts available for everyone on our website. All right, now here's my conversation with Nola. Nola, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you here.
Thank you, Adil. It's great to be here.
So, do you want to tell us kind of where you're located? I have a suspicion, but let's see if it's true.
Sure. So I am in Canada, and I'm in the western province of Alberta. And I'm in northern Alberta, so I am north of the 52nd parallel.
Yeah, wow, that's pretty. Is that so? Let me remind myself. I am Canadian, so I should know some of this. Is like Red Deer up there, or
Red Deer's up there. Edmonton. Okay. So Edmonton is the capital. Edmonton is north of Red Deer, and I'm 2.5 hours north of Edmonton.
Oh, okay. Edmonton's even more north. Yeah. Gotcha.
But
okay.
moving here, actually, this was a move south for me. I spent 12 years living in Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories, which is above the 62nd parallel.
Yeah. For American listener, that's kind of, roughly Alaska-ish kind of.
Well, it is, and it's the Canadian Arctic. So I lived in the Canadian Arctic for 12 years, but and that was great. I'm originally from Newfoundland, so
okay.
On the East
You've
Coast.
Been all over. Yeah, very east.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, and I guess, I'd love to hear more about how those moves happened, but maybe kind of what do you do up there in northern Alberta?
Well, I've been a registered nurse for 37 years, and it has helped me move around. There's generally a job for a nurse wherever you go. So,
yeah,
that
makes sense.
So I actually came to northern Alberta to teach in a community college to teach practical nursing program. So it's not the program that leads you to a registered nurse. Here it leads you to what's called a licensed practical nurse.
Mm-hmm.
There is an American equivalent, but right now I can't recall what it is. But yeah.
Cool. Well, we were talking a little bit before, and you said that you just found out about misophonia 2 months ago.
Yes.
So do you want to tell us kind of how that came to be? What led you to that moment?
Yes. So I love crime TV, crime shows, and I was watching Criminal Minds. I don't know if you're familiar with that TV show.
I'm familiar with. I don't watch it, but I know the show. Yeah.
And it was a particular episode in season 13, I think it was. I was watching. And one of the characters had this problem with hearing and being so sensitive to sounds. And one of the, investigators on the show said, well, there's this thing called misophonia that some people have hypersensitivity to sounds. So I thought, misophonia? And it was like, somebody just took a sledgehammer and hit me in the side of the head. So I stopped the episode and I pulled out my phone and I Googled misophonia. And I thought, oh, so this is what I've been dealing with for over 50 years. Okay, cool. Now we have a name for it. Now we can learn something more about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So was it the murderer who had misophonia, or was it
No, and
the
he didn't
genius himself?
actually. He
Okay.
didn't actually have misophonia. I think what
Mm.
he actually had was hyperacusis. Now that I've
Mm.
done some more research,
Yep. Yep.
yeah,
Commonly confused. Commonly confused,
yeah. But
especially in the media.
yeah, but it was such a relief
Yeah.
to know that it actually there is a name, and when you have that information, then with the wonders of the internet, wow.
Yeah, you can go down that rabbit hole like many of us
Well,
do.
and then I found you with the Misophonia podcast and started listening to episodes. I thought, okay, look at all these other people, have had these life experiences. And some, there have been some very young people you've
Mm-hmm.
interviewed, and thought, wow, they have such a better opportunity now. This, I don't know, 17 or 18-year-old person I think was on your show, and I thought, wow, good. They know now at this age that this is something. This is a thing. It's valid, and we're moving forward with our information and our tools, and they're not going to be me at 59 discovering that this is
Mm-hmm.
something, you know, and having lived all of my life with all of these upsets and holes and all these things in my story, they don't
Mm-hmm.
have to have that. It can be better for them. So that's
Yeah.
so exciting for me.
Yeah. No, that's
Yeah.
very promising. Even if there isn't like a cure or official treatment, it's I mean
Yeah.
that validation, just knowing that there are others and there are ways, there are tools. Like sometimes you don't have to use them. Just the fact that
Yeah.
they're there is comforting. So
Exactly. Exactly. And having community. Community is so important, as humans, we're pack animals, and we're born to be in packs and to be in herds and to do all of this, in community, and to have the variety of community that's available for misophonia is incredible to me as well. Um,
yeah,
Between, Facebook groups and your podcast, and then different associations and different, you can go on and do a search and find the research and all kinds of different things. So, yeah.
so we'll go back obviously through history. I'm curious, like with a lot of stuff happening, did you were you not no one else before obviously, so it seemed like it mentioned it to you. Were you
No.
did you always think it was something else maybe?
Oh, I just always thought there was something very wrong with me.
Hmm. Just you, yeah.
But it was my problem to deal with. Like, even as a little girl, um, when I would be activated, well, nobody had the language for any of this back then. And yeah, it was just me being difficult, me being the problem at the dinner table. Um, and not wanting to be the problem at the dinner table, which was the added distress of the whole thing. I
Right, the
wanted to,
shame.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to sit at the table and, interact with my family, but yeah, yeah,
So I'm assuming then, yeah, I guess 50 years ago, around this 8 to 10 age, triggered by family members, kind of your
yeah,
first. Yeah.
yeah. My dad's the first one that I remember being triggered by at the table, the eating. And it was followed, not, I think, not too long after that by my brother, but it wasn't my brother's eating. My brother developed some tics
Mm,
and some behaviors. He was actually, in his early teens, investigated to see if he had Tourette's
mm-hmm.
syndrome, which didn't come back as a diagnosis, but a lot of those things then triggered me as well. Yeah.
Right.
And yeah.
And what were I guess, well, yeah, what were some of your reactions? Was it just kind of, were you acting out at your family? Were you just trying to leave?
Well, I would try to not act out, right? I would try to
Yeah.
sit there and suffer through it. And sometimes I was successful. Um, and sometimes I wasn't. And it would range anywhere from me, looking at my dad and saying, like, and I don't know, you can cut this out or whatever, but saying, like, can you eat with your mouth closed? Like, why do you have to have your mouth open? Do you not? Here's what
Right.
I would every now and again say to him: do you not have enough skin on your face that would allow you to close your mouth when you're chewing?
That's what you said to him?
Yes. And that's just such, that's just,
Yeah.
yeah.
What
Or,
did he say?
well, he would just look at me and he'd be hurt, and I didn't want to hurt him. He'd be hurt and confused, and he'd just laugh it off and say, well, I eat this way, you eat that way.
Right.
And yeah.
Did was there anything going on around the house that was
Yeah.
unusual around that time?
Well, I've had a lot of opportunity to really reflect. And since I found out that, this has this name and it is this legitimate thing, it's opened up a lot of things that have been hiding in me for a very long time. So I've really been able to reflect back and think, where did this all come from and why? And we definitely grew up in a house. We grew up my brother and I, in a house that was very quiet, except for mealtimes, but except for those. But
Yeah.
a house that was very quiet, where emotions were not really welcome unless they were on the side of the spectrum from happy and onwards. So if you were in a good mood and you were happy and you were, on that end of the spectrum, then all was good. But if you were sad, if you hurt yourself, you were crying about something, those were things that were not welcome, and they were brushed off, shut down, not attended to. And so very lopsided on the, when you look at the scale of human emotions. So very lopsided. My
Not a lot
dad,
of comforting.
no. And my dad had mental health problems, and he still does to this day. And he was hospitalized a couple of times for severe depression. Back in the 70s, they still did shock treatments, so he had shock treatments done.
They still do that now, actually, in some cases.
Come back. It's come back into favor now. Thankfully, though, with more and better research.
Right.
And there is some really positive results coming from it. Yeah. So we walked on eggshells, my brother and I, a lot of the times, because it depended on what Dad was, what his presence was in the house. And then my mother, bless her, ran around trying to keep the peace and hold it all together. And yeah, at cost to her as well. So yeah. So,
and your brother, did
yeah.
did anyone else, well, I should say maybe did anyone else in your family develop misophonia or any kind of sensitivities?
No, not that I'm aware
Oh,
of.
see, you didn't even know that you had it until
Yeah,
a
I
couple
didn't
months
even know
ago,
that
so
I
it's
had
kind
it
of a
till 2 months. Yeah,
silly question.
exactly.
So then how did interesting, walking on eggshells, I mean, if you hear more and more episodes, you hear that phrase comes up a lot for a lot of us,
Yeah.
when we're growing up. I guess, how did it, as you were getting older, did it start to affect things at school?
And that's one of the things I honestly, because I had listened to an interview just in the new year. I think it might have been the first one in the new year this year. The man's name was Brian.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I identified so much with what he talked about, with having these big gaps in memory. I really don't remember. I really don't. And I think now maybe that's a piece of a protective mechanism. just because if I was to remember it all, it would be too much, and it would really overwhelm my nervous system and everything else. But yeah, I really don't. What I do remember, though, in particular, is when I was in university doing my bachelor's of nursing degree, we had a professor, and she was our communications professor. She would walk up and down the rows between us, and she always had money in her pockets, and she would jingle the money in her pockets. And I remember fantasizing about ripping her arm off and smacking her in the face with her hand.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the things that has really, I found it quite frightening for me, because I'm a very gentle
Yeah.
person.
You're
But
Mr. Hyde, but then you
I've
can,
had
yeah.
these fantasies, these visions of literally ripping somebody's head off. Like in the fantasy, that's what I do. I rip their arm off, or I rip their head off, or it's what I, and I think, where in the world is that coming from? But yeah, it's triggers, and it's nervous system dysregulation, and it's all kinds of things like that. It's not who I am.
Yeah, I know, of course. So, I mean, it's pretty shocking when we think about what goes on through our heads. So how did you make sense of it? I guess you said you thought something was wrong, but how did you then deal with it? You just shoved those thoughts down and just thought this is part of something that's wrong
Stuff
with
it,
me? Yeah.
stuff it, stuff it, stuff it. Yeah, yeah, and then pay the price for it later, which was actually what and I really paid the price for it in the fall of 2021, because I had what we used to call a nervous breakdown. We don't call it that anymore. Now we call it uh, major depressive disorder is the
Mm-hmm.
DSM-5 um, thing, the
Yeah.
title on it. But we used to call it a nervous breakdown. And I would always wonder, what really was a nervous breakdown? And my understanding now, my nervous system really did break down. It wasn't the messages are not firing correctly. I'm dysregulated. I'm either, flat on my back and can't move, or I'm, moving and I don't know why I'm moving. I can't remember things. I can't go to work anymore. I've been off work now for, well, a year and a half. And
Mm.
yeah, so and that's the result of stuffing it down.
So do you want to, was it just kind of, I don't know, I don't want to get too deep into it, but was it one day you woke up and you were in the throes of it? Just couldn't get
No,
out?
no, it's the slippery slope.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'd been on the slippery slope. I stood at the top of the slippery slope
Yeah.
in February of 2020,
Yeah.
actually, with things that were going on in my workplace. Um,
Was any of that COVID related? Because that's,
oh,
yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, 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 because the work I do is directly related to
Of
seniors'
course.
health, and yeah, so I stood on the top of the slippery slope. All those things started to unfold. More responsibility got laid on me, um, and so a year later, insomnia
Mm.
started, and again, and I just kept trying to, well, what can I do to fix this? What can I do to fix that? How can I, nothing really seemed to work well. So by April of 2021, I just woke up no, I went to work. I went to work in the morning, and there were two or three things that happened at work, and I stood up and just thought to myself, if I don't leave now, something really bad's going to happen. So I better leave.
You just had a
And
sense of it.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it had been, with the insomnia, of course, driving, because I had different offices that I oversight. So I could, on a day, have to drive 2 hours in one direction to get to my furthest away site, and then
Mm-hmm.
of course 2 hours back, and I started falling asleep behind the wheel. Yeah, so yeah, but it wasn't only work, right? There were other things going on as well, and honestly, the result of a lifetime of having a dysregulated nervous system. Um, that
Yeah, I mean,
just,
it's been
yeah,
weakened over time,
yeah,
and
right?
eventually there was a breaking point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, fortunately, I'm in a much better place now than I was, and I've learned so much. And really, the piece of misophonia um, has it was like the final piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it seems like there was a lot of, well, numerous things going on, but it's
Yeah,
interesting to hear for you that the misophonia being kind of a final piece that maybe not ties everything together, but it seems like it's been a major part of the
well,
last 50
yeah,
years.
and explains so much of
Yeah.
what. Yeah, yeah,
It's interesting, yeah, because a lot of people I talk to, and myself as well, because when I started this podcast, I didn't realize that it had to do, I didn't realize it had to do with the nerve. I didn't know what the heck the nervous system was. I
right,
didn't realize it
right.
had anything to do with the past,
Yeah,
other than it started at a certain time. But,
right.
uh, yeah, all these things that it's, you know, linked to in terms of relationships with other family members
Hmm.
and walking on eggshells and stuff. I guess, yeah, maybe what are some of the questions that it answered for you about your life?
Well, one of the biggest things that I've been in search of in my life, and this was an instinctive search that I now understand as co-regulation. So it's co-regulation and attachment of infants and mothers.
Mm,
And it's how the nervous systems of the baby and the mother work together. And that's part, even prenatally, right? So I've spent a lot of my years as a nurse working in maternal child health, which of course turns out to be no accident, because it led me into, you know, my own investigations into attachment disorders, co-regulation. We're looking at nervous system regulation, all of those kinds of things. And it, for me, it's never nurture versus nature. It's how does nature, or how does nurture impact nature?
hmm.
So epigenetics.
Yeah, yeah,
I just love. I'm so
me too.
fascinated.
Please, yeah, say as much as you want about that stuff.
Yeah,
I'm also fascinated. Yeah.
and that's something that, while it's been around for a few decades, it's only, I think, in the last 2 decades that it's really become part of accepted, more and more accepted as being true. That epigenetics, the impact of our environment on who we are and how we become. That yeah, it just fascinates me, and I see it. I see it in the work that I do. I was a public health nurse for years, and you know, I had the absolute honor of meeting people in their own homes, which was always, because for me that always evened the playing field. So if I'm showing up at your door as a public health nurse, I'm the professional. I'm the, and there's always a danger of that being an imbalanced relationship,
Hmm.
where the professional comes in and tells you everything you're doing wrong and how to do it all right. That was never my thing. So, being somebody who visited people in their own homes, well, then I get to see, right? I get to see the environments, get to see how people adapt to
Hmm.
their environments, what things they do in order to, um, you know, come out of circumstances and do different things, just powerful, powerful things that people do. But it explains a lot of the epigenetics. And along with that, so when we talk about it, or when I talk about epigenetics and I'm talking about the environment, I'm talking about a group of factors that are called the social determinants of health. And the social determinants of health are things like your income, your your access to food, right? The availability to food, the availability of good food. What's your access? Your literacy. Can you read and write? What level can you read and write? Where do you live? Do you live in inner city Chicago, or do you live in, rural Canada that's only accessible by plane in the winter and boat in the summer? Those things matter. And yeah, so epigenetics just fascinates me.
Right. Yeah. There was somebody told me at one point, like, an infant's brain hasn't fully separated from the mother's brain, and sometimes it doesn't yet know that it's even a separate entity, which I thought was kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, yeah, a lot of,
And
yeah,
out of that,
interesting.
for me, one of the biggest things, and I wonder at some point in time, I hope to connect with some of the researchers, some of the people who are doing research and who are, coming up with questionnaires and things. I want to know, in particular, if babies, if those of us with misophonia, when we were babies, were we breastfed?
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
so I don't know if this is the first time breastfeeding has come up on your podcast, but I think it's a relevant
Yeah.
question because the act of breastfeeding co-regulates the baby's nervous system. It
Right.
also regulates the mother's nervous system, and that was something I dove into. The whole breastfeeding thing. I became a lactation consultant. I've studied it over the past almost 40 years. Yeah, again, because for me, there's a huge connection um, that may help to explain a lot of nervous system dysregulation
Hmm.
problems, you know?
Yeah. Breast milk is definitely like a wonder, kind of a wonder fluid. Um,
And yeah, and there's even that, right? So we look at, so what are the contents of breast milk? And we
yeah.
know that the milk is adapted to whatever the baby's needs are,
Right.
the
Right.
age of the baby, all of those things. It comes, and there's the physical act of breastfeeding. So you can take the breast milk and put it in a bottle and feed it to a baby,
Yeah. I was going to ask
right?
you, is that what you meant too? Right.
Yeah, right. But it's the act of
Skin on
wrapping the
skin.
baby,
Yeah.
the skin
Yeah.
to skin contact, and all of those things that go into forming that relationship and that stability and that um, grounding of nervous systems, so that you can go forward. And I've looked back now at some things that happened to my mom, or with my mom and my dad when my mom was pregnant with me. And I now see that there were some things that happened that were very, very tough psychologically
Mm.
to deal with. And I thought, okay, so that would explain. Yeah. I, so I now see that I came into this world with a nervous system that was set for dysregulation, and then the
Hmm.
environment, the epigenetics piece of it,
Hmm.
just fed that, right? And it went on and on. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. Yeah, you're right. And you're not, yeah, not the first one who's kind of brought obviously epigenetics, but also, yeah, the mother-child relationship. Yeah, hadn't heard of breastfeeding, but you're right. I mean, I've got two kids, and yeah, the doctors tell you in the hospital like to get the baby when it comes out onto the mom skin to skin as soon as
Yes.
possible.
Yep. Yep. And I worked on an obstetrics ward for 5 years, and I would do my best, even for moms who were not interested in breastfeeding. That
Mm-hmm.
that was okay. That's fine. Um, but I would work with them to allow the baby to snuggle and to, you know, lie on their chest just to listen to their heartbeat, and then wrap mother and baby up together. You know, just wrap a flannel blanket over and kind of tuck
Right.
it in, and then mom and baby have a nap and everybody feels better. And yeah.
Well, since we're kind of somewhat related, I know we're getting veering a little bit away, but it's all related for misophonia. Then
Yeah.
what would your thoughts be on like C-sections?
C-section. Well,
Like in
we,
terms of like the difference from obviously natural
yeah,
birth and
yeah,
maybe a somewhat traumatic kind of situation.
that is, C-sections are always traumatic, from my perspective, right? And
Yeah.
this is, yeah, I know Western medicine, yeah, I've witnessed C-sections that really didn't need to happen. And I think it is because it's for me, it's a separation then. It's necessary when it's necessary, and thank
Right.
heavens we have the ability to do it and do it safely. Um,
Well, I know some people who
and
schedule it in advance because they have a meeting like the next
well,
week.
yeah, or you know, the doctor has a golf game or whatever it
Right.
is. You know, whose convenience is it for? Yeah, I used to question, you know, just in my own heart and mind, question those things. But then what I would do with these mom baby couplets would be to work to do skin to skin. So as soon as it was safe for mom and baby, then we work on skin to skin. Then we work on those things and we get the connections back that way. Because there's time. The first 24 hours is really crucial, but there's always a chance. There's always an opportunity to make that connection and to get that back. And it doesn't have to be skin to skin. I mean, that's the idea. But even if you can get moms and babies to cuddle up together and to sleep together is even
Mm-hmm.
better too.
Yeah. 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 Not in
Yeah.
some crib out, in some other room. Um, so, okay, interesting. So let's maybe, yeah, I want to hear about, I guess, after, well, so it sounds like school is kind of blocked out, maybe as you're getting into the real world. So this is now after I've probably, hopefully, I've
Yeah.
not alienated all these moms who've made choices about C-sections. So not judging anybody, but,
No,
um,
this is no judgment, and this is just
right.
me from my perspective. And I grieve. I grieve for mothers and babies who are not given the opportunities and supported to
Hmm.
to have their best possible relationship. It really does. It makes me so sad. But
And then, yeah, so then, yeah, as you did kind of grow up and become an adult, so obviously you went to college and stuff. How did that, when you went out into the world, how did it start to, like, you must have had coping methods at that point. What did you start to do in the world?
well, it was things like, you know, leaving.
Yeah, the flight.
Became so good at leaving. That was one
Yeah.
of my superpowers.
I know all the doors, got them mapped out. I can go with my eyes closed.
Oh yeah, and going into a new place, like an unfamiliar environment, and scanning the environment
Hmm.
for, okay, what's where and where's the nearest door and how close can I sit, and yeah, I mean those, you know, just the nervous system impact, right? So you're in a heightened awareness, even going into things that are pleasant. Or
Yeah.
should be pleasant, right? And may be pleasant for most people who are there, but it has the potential to be very unpleasant.
Did you,
Um,
with all this stuff going on, did you ever, at some point, did you ever, I don't know, develop any comorbid, like anxiety or go in to see a professional suspecting something like that?
well, you know, I have gone to therapy off and on over the years,
Mm-hmm.
and it was always for things that, um, you know, anxiety, some, I'll call it low flying depression levels, the sense of things just not being right. But you know, now I look at it and I think the underlying um, thread in all of that was that I had this misophonia that was triggering me left, right, and center I think there's something so wrong with me that it's just impossible. And nobody else has the insight or the awareness because, again, we didn't have the language.
Right. So you're at some point with all the misophonia triggers, your nervous system's compromised,
Yeah,
and all these other
yeah, yeah,
symptoms that have more popular names
yeah,
um,
yeah,
show their face.
yeah, yeah. I mean, now, well, since I've had to take a leave of absence from work, um, I've really had the opportunity now to double down, I guess, on all kinds of therapy. Um, but in particular, now, since I know about misophonia, I'm really, really fortunate that my psychologist is open. She's very open to what I want to do. So I bought Dr. Jennifer Brout's books.
Mm-hmm.
I bought an adult's guide to misophonia, and then I bought a clinician's guide to misophonia, and I bought 2 copies of that. And then I bought Jeffrey Scott Gould's documentary, Quiet
Yep.
Please, and I bought 2 copies of that. So I took a copy of the documentary and a copy of the clinician's guide to my therapist. And I said, well, she was so grateful that I brought it to her because I just thought, well, I don't want to add to her workload to tell her, here, go look at this, go look at that. I brought these
Right.
things. And so she's engaging in the video and the book. And I saw her 2 weeks ago. We started now to do EMDR
Mm-hmm.
therapy for misophonia. She's willing, right? She's open, she's willing to learn. And when I described it to her, she said, I know people who talked about something like that. I just didn't know it had a name. Good. So now she's educated on it, which is great. I
So
have another healthcare provider. She's an osteopath. And so after I, started to learn about misophonia, I had an appointment with her and I said, so I've made this discovery. I have this thing called misophonia. And she said, what's that? And I said, well, it's, and I described a few things and she just put her hands on her desk and looked at me. She said, oh my God, I have that too.
Ah.
She said, in my uh, um, elementary school yearbook, she said, there's my picture and my pet peeve was people chewing gum.
Yep. That sounds familiar.
So so she has it and didn't know it had a name.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So
yeah.
the EMDR that you're doing, so yeah, do you want to talk about like what that entails?
So that's and I can never remember all what it's eye movement something
Desensitization,
desensitization.
repetitive
Yes.
something. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's something I had done with my therapist before around some childhood trauma and
Right. It's usually used for childhood trauma
yeah.
or other types of trauma. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I said to her, what would you think about EMDR and with the misophonia focus? She said, absolutely. And boy, I tell you, it came fast. She, because they set up an environment, of safety and all
Mm-hmm.
these things
Mm-hmm.
for you and ask you questions. You have to find and describe your safe place that you can go to if you need, or that, your therapist can cue you to go to if needed, and then the questions start, and the setting. So it was, okay, so put yourself, at the age of 8 at the supper table, you
Yeah.
know, and so I did, and oh, Adele, I think it was 10 seconds, if or
Really?
less, that I was right back there in a full blown, but not having the anxiety, because this is what she's doing, right? So she's watching to
Mm-hmm.
see what my response is. And so she pulled me out
Mm.
and then did these eye movement. And then we'd go back in again, do some more, and then come out and do eye movement, because the idea is to retrain the circuitry.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And we're going to do some more. It really, it lifted um, so much of the crud out of my body that I felt lighter.
Wow. So this is pretty recent then.
Yes, this was like
Yeah.
2 weeks ago.
Okay. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It'd be interesting to hear how that goes.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely heard of that, EMDR being used for this, but again, it's not. I mean, it's not. So, misophonia is not that well known. So, was it relatively easy then for your therapist who had not heard of misophonia before to adapt it for misophonia?
Oh, yeah. It was
Okay.
just the context of the situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all
Yeah.
it was. I described it to her, my earliest memory. That's what she wanted. Was
Yeah.
my earliest memory of this being something that caused me distress, and that was where we started.
Interesting.
So
So
I
you,
would think that anybody who is an EMDR practitioner should be able to do that for somebody.
yeah. So then, so you were, so it's basically focusing on a memory of when you're triggered, not like a walking on eggshell situation, right? It's an actual,
Right.
yeah, yeah,
No,
yeah,
it's the actual sitting at the
yeah.
yeah, sitting at the table, and yeah.
And so the goal of the rewiring is to make it so you feel less in danger when you're
Yes.
in. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so that those memories become non-threatening. They just
Hmm.
become something that occurred with
Right, and you,
no particular emotion attached to it. Just
gotcha.
becomes
Fascinating.
a neutral experience. I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fascinating. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Very curious to see how this works out for you.
Yeah.
Um.
Yeah.
So, anything else that do you guys have been thinking about working on?
Well,
Or is this like a
we've
major
worked on
revelation?
we've
Yeah.
worked on
Actually, yeah. I'm
so
curious. Maybe
much.
right.
Yeah.
What are a few things that didn't work, and as you guys were trying things out.
Well, see, we just started the Misophonia
Okay.
work
Ah. I
two
see.
weeks
Gotcha.
ago.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because I brought her the information just after Christmas. I had ordered the books and the
Ah. Yeah.
DVD over the Christmas break, and then I brought them into her at the beginning of January when I saw
Gotcha.
her, and then I wanted her to have
Yeah.
time, to have a look through and do some things. And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So then I guess maybe, yeah, rewinding back. So then a little bit. So yeah, we talked about kind of like being an adult, and yeah, you just now you're just putting everything in context and how your misophonia was probably dysregulating you. How did it affect adult relationships?
Oh,
It's a whole other
I
conversation, I'm
have
sure.
so well. My current husband, we've been together 5 years now,
Hmm.
and I it was funny when I remembered this. I remember when we first got together, say 6 years ago, and so looking at it now, looking back, and thinking, oh, okay, I remember having it in my mind with getting to know him and all of these things. And I remember thinking, I wonder how long it's going to be before things start to get on my nerves.
Hmm.
Or maybe this time it won't. And I remember thinking that. But of course, it did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it has caused problems, especially, we have different eating habits,
Hmm.
patterns. He doesn't eat usually until supper time. Like
Hmm.
he goes all day and doesn't eat. And so supper is his first meal, and then he eats all evening. And yeah.
It's okay. It's just
Yeah.
mouth chewing noises all
And he
when you get home.
snores.
Yeah.
And has a CPAP machine.
Yeah.
And it's all well and good as long as that's all working well. But, and I'm going to tell you, because I know he's never going to listen to this anyway. He has dentures. I don't know if anybody else has talked to you about about people who wear dentures. And then, you have misophonia and the difference.
Yeah, I had
that,
an 83-year-old woman on, so that
oh,
came up.
okay. Yeah. So, that adds a whole other element to it. But I will say this for him: he has since I made the discovery and I got a lot of the information. He has come on board. He gave me a beautiful set of wireless earphones for Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
And we can sit on the couch now. Now, we still don't sit next to each other, but we can sit on the couch.
Baby steps, yeah.
And I can put in an earphone and I put on the brown noise soundtrack that you have available. Oh, that has saved me. Oh, that I just love that one. And so
Awesome.
we can put on the TV, we can watch something, he can eat. I'll put in the earphone on whatever side he's on. So if he's
Right.
sitting on my right, I put in the right earphone. And and so it's working. It's working.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Which is really good. And so yesterday morning when I got up, I was drawn to write a poem about misophonia, and I wrote this poem and I printed it off. I gave it to him last night when he came home from work, and he read it and he looked at me. He said, "I am so sorry. I am so sorry that you have to deal with this." And I thought, okay, so you get it. You get it a little bit more. You're never going to get it because you don't have it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you get it a little bit more. Yeah.
Do you wanna read the poem? Is it a
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah. So I called it the Misophonia Fault Line. So it's not the San Andreas fault, but it's the Misophonia fault.
Yep.
My nervous system has a fault line. The shock waves of everyday sounds cause my nervous system to quake and tremble, splitting me open, exposing my vulnerability, assaulting me, setting off a seismic response that has no choice but to come to fruition. The fault line is open, letting in all manner of truths, lies, and warped perceptions. I get stuck in the mire, unable to move to save me. The earth crumbles, casting stones of all sizes. I am beaten and bruised, inside and out. The fault line closes, never completely. This chain of events occurs in milliseconds and goes on for seconds, minutes, and hours. It is repeated umpteen times every 24 hours. Respite is vital in the aftermath of a quake. Downtime may remain elusive. Day and night are fraught with dangers. Sleep is not my saving grace. More perilous tremors await. This pattern has replayed itself for more than 50 years. I am exhausted. The switch is broken. I cannot turn it off. Interrupting the signals to hinder the degree of impact is the way to some relief. Learn recovery strategies, practice and communicate. Heal in the in-between. My nervous system has a fault line. Its name is misophonia.
Wow, beautiful.
Yeah. I can send you a copy if you
Oh
like.
yeah,
I
I'd
can
love to.
email it to you.
Yeah, I'd
Yeah.
love to. And if you don't mind, maybe I don't know, post it on
Oh,
Instagram with
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that metaphor. I mean, I love any art related to misophonia, and then especially with metaphors and things that explore not just the the mechanical I'm triggered by a sound, but also the that emotional aspect, the different layers. Yeah, it's a great way to
Yeah.
put it.
Yeah.
So that's great. reaction that you got from your husband. You by the way, what kind of wireless earphones did you get?
They are called Happy Plugs. I don't even know who
Hmm.
makes them.
Okay.
They're definitely cheaper than, so they're about half the price of Apple,
Sure. Sure.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're awesome. They come in this little case that's rechargeable, and they do. They last for a long time. The other thing that he gave me was a headband that has wireless headphones, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
Bluetooth
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
headband, and so I wore it at night, but then it it just stopped working. So we returned it, and we're waiting for them to get some more in. But that was helping me as well. I would play the brown noise soundtrack at night because I'm so sensitive to everything that goes on
Yeah.
in the environment, that I can hear a pin drop. I really can.
Yeah.
And so it could wake me from my sleep, right? So not just him and the snoring, other things can wake me. So having that for nighttime was making a difference as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Did misokinesia ever become a thing
Oh,
for
yeah.
you? Yeah. Okay. I was like, I haven't
And
brought that up yet, so curious.
sometimes I think that that's even worse than the
Mm-hmm.
misophonia. But what I do see now, though, too, is that it's really the degree to which I am dysregulated is
Mm-hmm.
directly proportional to my overall state. So if I've gotten a good night's sleep,
Right.
right, and those kinds of things are in place, then I am more likely to not be triggered to, not go from 0 to 60. Maybe I go from 0 to 20, and able to pull my, it happens, it's shorter, and I can process it faster and carry on. But when I was going through all that insomnia and all of that stuff, everything was, it felt like everything was a trigger. It felt like the
Mm-hmm.
whole wide world was just out to get me.
Right.
And
Right.
yeah.
So, you mentioned so it's your current husband. Was there another?
Yeah. Yes, and we had 3 children
Okay.
together.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and that, I just look at all the other things that kind of go hand in hand into a household environment, And when I look at him and he grew up in a household with an alcoholic father,
Mm,
and a mother who tried her best to keep it all together, but the alcoholic father would just do all these things. You know, he wasn't a quiet person
mm-hmm.
when he was actively drinking. So, so he came out of a traumatic, he had
Yeah.
a traumatic childhood. I had a traumatic childhood. Neither one of us had really any degree of emotional literacy, I'll call it. We came in as, the 5 and 6 year olds that we were just going around masquerading as adults. When you look at um, adverse childhood events, I don't know if that's come up at all
Not that
across
term,
you.
but yeah.
So they're called ACEs, and it's adverse childhood events. And there's a questionnaire, but there's a lot of research that has gone into this. And again, it comes back to epigenetics. So how has the environment impacted? ACEs are particularly aimed at people under the age of 18. Age of 18 is the stop mark. And it's, did you grow up in an environment, with somebody in your home who was abusing substances? Did you have enough food to eat? Did you have, there are all these things. So when I did and it's 10 items, a score of 4 or more means that you are more at risk of developing emo- um, mental health problems, psychological problems. You're possibly more likely, to go down that pathway
Mm-hmm.
of having a more troubled life, one that's not terribly rewarding, in good ways. And so my score was 5. And I mean, I don't know how my ex-husband would have answered, but when I answered, thinking his was 7. And I thought, wow, how do a 5 and a 7 come together without the emotional literacy and
Mm-hmm.
without even the awareness that it's something that we can change, we can do. We got married in 1988. So again, the language and the understanding wasn't there. So thank heavens for research,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
people now have access to things that we certainly didn't have access
Right.
to grow the understanding and to realize, at the end of the day, I don't think we really were suited for each other,
Yeah.
but I think we could have gotten there on a smoother road.
Yeah. Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What about your kids? Do they now know about your misophonia?
Yes, so I have one daughter who lives with me, and I told her about it, talked about it, and pardon me, she doesn't have misophonia, but it seems as though she may have hyperacusis.
Mm.
So we've talked about things in the house, uh, what things does she need? So the signal on the microwave oven drives her
It's got to be
insane.
off. Me too.
Yeah. So she will stand there and wait, and when it gets down to like 2 seconds, then she'll just turn it off so it doesn't
Yeah.
make a sound. Yeah.
A lot of them, there's a hidden code to turn off the sound
Oh,
completely.
is there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I know with our washer and dryer, we can turn off the signal, so that's
Yeah.
fine. We've done that. But yeah.
Oh, and I have one. I just got a microwave because we redid our kitchen. But not only is the mute button right, like on the main keypad, but
Okay.
it's a Breville microwave. Like it actually has a soft close door. So even if you slam it,
Oh,
it's kind of like one of those new drawers where it's a
yeah.
much it's a much. I mean, you still hear something,
Yeah.
but it's a much quieter sound. So I don't hear it up
Right.
on the third floor.
Right. So it's a gentle,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. It's like
Mm-hmm.
I describe it as a rolling close versus a spring close.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Spring-loaded close is a quick.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Good to know.
somebody at Breville's thinking about this stuff, or maybe he or she has misophonia.
Yes, it could be.
But so, but yeah, in general, like the rest of your family, your kids, I don't know, have they maybe reminded you of memories from back in the day, or are they at least sympathetic, other
Well,
than just daughter?
my daughter who's here with me, yeah, she certainly is, and so we share with each other.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so is there something? How is this for you? Is sort of the question. It's the And we can ask each other that question in mixed company, and nobody's
yeah,
gonna,
right.
yeah, it's kind of the
That's great.
code. It's the code.
Yeah, yeah,
It's instead of looking at each other saying, "Have you had enough? Do you need to leave now?" It's, how are
right,
you
right.
doing here? How
Yeah,
is this?
well,
Yeah,
that's great.
yeah,
That's huge. Um,
yeah.
one more thing you mentioned in your note when you did the invite was polyvagal theory. I don't
Oh
know if we've
yes.
danced around. Obviously, we've not danced around, but we've talked about the nervous system a lot. But I'm also fascinated by polyvagal theory, and this is all kind of related.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, talk to me about that.
yeah. So polyvagal theory, I came across that. Oh, I'm gonna say maybe 10 years ago now, and it actually is one of the things that my therapist works with. She consciously works with polyvagal theory with me. So I got more interested and more interested. And, Stephen Porges, he's the doctor who developed this theory. His work is becoming again, more and more accepted. And it really explains for me how I've gone up and down. So sometimes it's described as a ladder. So polyvagal, so it's your vagus nerve, which is the largest of your cranial nerves, of your 12 sets of cranial nerves in your brain, your spinal cord, your nervous system. And the vagus nerve is the largest, and the vagus nerve goes many places. So it's also known as the wandering nerve.
Mm.
And I've heard it referred to as the soul nerve because it goes so many places. So when I look at polyvagal theory, it's about 3 particular components in this. So we have ventral vagal, sympathetic, and dorsal vagal is what the theory talks about. And ventral vagal, this is where we as people are meant to spend the majority of our time, is living in a ventral vagal state where we're safe, we're connected, and we're social. And where our parasympathetic nervous system is the one that is active, not the sympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system is the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, right? The parasympathetic nervous system is also known as the rest and digest nervous system.
Yep.
So it's the relaxed and the flow and the, right? So that's where we're meant to be. We're meant as people in especially people who have access to money and to different things, we're meant to spend our time in parasympathetic state. That's not where we spend our time, but if you read Dr. Gabor Maté's work,
Great
Dr.
man.
Bessel van der Kolk,
Yeah.
Peter Levine, we understand that, that's not where we're hanging out. We're hanging out, a lot of us, in the middle of the ladder, which is the sympathetic state. And in the sympathetic state, that's danger. Our nervous system is mobilized. We're ready to take action, and we can get into the fight and flight piece of things. So that's being watchful, in your environment. Like we said earlier about, you go in, you have to do this scan of the room to see, well, where's the door and where's this and where's that. So that comes from a sympathetic state. So when we're doing those things, we've dropped down into sympathetic state, where in that state, if we stay there and then other things happen, then we're going to really be activated. And we're going to want to fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And there's no saber-toothed tiger chasing us, right? There really isn't. But our bodies remember and imagine these threats. The furthest down on the ladder is called dorsal vagal. And in that mode, and I became very familiar with that mode because that's where I landed. And that was where I got the diagnosis of major depressive disorder and PTSD. And in dorsal vagal, our body believes that our life is being threatened. It's a true life threat. It's gone from danger to being an actual life threat. We become immobilized, we shut down, and we collapse. And so that, just having that, and I even have a little visual of the ladder. I have a 1-pager thing that just helps me to see, okay, where am I now? Where am I in this moment? Okay, I go here and I can come back. So with my therapist, the first of the work was to have me come out of dorsal vagal. We worked for months to get me out of dorsal vagal. With a lot of energy work, EMDR, a couple of other techniques that she uses, and Not a lot of talk therapy, not a lot of cognitive behavioral talk therapy. That has its place, but it's just one tool in the
Mm-hmm.
toolbox, you
Mm-hmm.
know? So I was able to move out of dorsal vagal into sympathetic. I had been in sympathetic for months and then started having episodes of actually moving into ventral vagal, actually feeling safe and connected, actually wanting to engage, actually feeling good when I engage. But then I had this misophonia thing that would trip me up.
Yeah.
But now it's not going to trip me up the same way it used to, because the devil has a name. And once you know the name, you can.
Yeah.
I'm in a position of power now, not the unknown.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Fascinating. No, thanks for that
yeah,
refresher. I always forget the various aspects of polyvagal, but yeah, it's fascinating. It's very much yeah. It's it's definitely explains a lot. Um,
yeah.
one thing when you said there, as part of your diagnoses from a couple of years ago, was PTSD. Was there a specific event that needs to be recognized for you to get a
Well,
PTSD
so yeah,
diagnosis, or
yeah, because the DSM-5 course has a very, very limited. They have a very
yeah.
narrow spectrum. So what the psychiatrist who gave me the diagnosis said is that she gave me the diagnosis of major depressive disorder with PTSD symptoms, was what she said,
Mm,
because it couldn't be attributed to one specific event,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Which
yeah.
is the DSM. I hope that they change that in the
Everybody does.
DSM,
Yeah.
because it's so limiting, and a lot of people are done a disservice by that. So I just, for sake of simplicity, I just say, well, I have PTSD, because as far as I'm concerned, the DSM is going to change their
Yeah.
definition, and I'll have PTSD according to them. But
Because I mean, there's PTSD, and I thought that yeah, CPTSD was maybe that, or like
complex trauma,
complex
yeah,
from
complex.
chronic trauma, and I kind of, I'm no doctor, but I kind of use the term chronic
Chronic,
trauma
yes,
when it's talking about things like the walking on eggshells, or like a
yeah,
repetitive kind of behavior that you witness um, growing up, kind of thing. So
yeah, yeah. And I love Gabor Mate's work around
yeah, me
trauma,
too.
because he explains it so well, because
Fellow
it's a
Canadian,
trauma.
fellow
Yes, a
Canadian.
fellow Canadian. And I've met him. Oh, he's oh, I've met him. I bought his book, When the Body Says No, The Cost of Hidden Stress. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
bought it 20 years ago, and I kept giving it away, right? I'd give away my copy to somebody who I thought needed it, and I'd buy a new one, and I did that over the years. And I went to a presentation he was doing, like, close to where I live. Myself and my therapist, actually, we went together, and
That's
he
an
was
interesting date.
autographing. Yeah. Well, I'm in a really small town
Yeah, yeah,
in
yeah.
North. There's 7,000 people here, um, so we went to a presentation, and afterwards he was, of course, signing books, and I bought two books, and I said, "Would you please autograph this one to me? I've bought and given away at least 20 copies of this book so far, but I'd like to
Yeah.
have one that I'm going to keep and not give away." What a lovely man. Oh, he's just so,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
yeah, just like well, actually sitting in the audience and having him present, it was like basking. I felt like I was basking in this warmth and in this sunlight. He's such a beautiful soul, and he lets it out to play, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and hearing his stories of trauma,
Right.
yeah, Yeah.
And would you recommend that as, because I haven't, he's one, I mean, obviously a huge fan. I've watched a lot of YouTube videos and interviews and all that stuff, but I haven't read one of his books yet. Is that the book that the book that he's written a lot? So is that the book that you recommend maybe we read first?
That would be
Or,
a good one to
yeah,
start with.
okay.
Yeah, it's called When the Body Says No, The Hidden
Yeah.
Cost of Stress. I think it's been out now. Well, it's been out for about 20 years, if not
Yeah,
more.
yeah,
But
yeah.
it is a good read, and it's not
Okay.
a big book. This last one that he put out, The Myth of Normal, is a huge book. I've only read little bits and pieces so far. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, okay. Yeah, Nola, I know we could
Yeah,
talk
we're
for
going to.
hours. We could talk
Yes.
for hours, but we're already over now here. Yeah, this has been fascinating. Anything else you want to share with people? Yeah, I know you
Really
have
what
lots, but
yeah, well, yeah, lots and lots, right? Really, I just want people to really understand, to really take it to heart that this is not darkness, that there's possibilities for misophonia, recovery, and how to live every day with it and still have what you want as a good life. Whatever that means to you, having a good life, and it's possible to do. And the more we learn, the better we're going to become. And the bigger the toolbox will be, and you can pick and choose and see what works. And you know, and if you already see somebody who does EMDR, talk to them about it for misophonia, because I really think that can be quite helpful.
yeah, no, this is great,
Yeah.
and a lot of people will learn. I know they're going to learn listening to this episode. So thank you for everything that you've shared, and yeah, I wish you the best. It sounds like promising days are ahead, and yeah, I hope we can keep in touch.
Oh, that would be awesome. Yes.
Thank you, Nola. Always great to talk to a fellow Canadian. Thank you for a great conversation, and I wish you the best in your therapy and health overall. If you like this episode, don't forget to leave a quick review or just hit the 5 stars wherever you listen to this podcast. You can hit me up by email at hello@misophoniapodcast.com or go to the website misophoniapodcast.com. It's even easier to send a message on Instagram at Misophonia Podcast. Follow there on Facebook, and on Twitter, we're Misophonia Show. Support the show by visiting the Patreon at patreon.com/Misophonia Podcast. Theme music, as always, is by Moby. And until next week, wishing you peace and quiet.